The first thing I noticed about the American was that his shirt was wrong for Manaus. Pressed cotton, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest he'd done it himself, but the fold was too clean. The fabric stayed crisp. No sweat worked in, no cheap brand on the chest, no tired football crest. He sat alone at a corner table of the riverfront bar, facing the mosquito screen and the dark slick of the Rio Negro, a glass of something pale in front of him. He looked like a man who had prepared for informal without knowing what that meant here. The second thing I noticed was how he watched the room. He didn't stare like tourists, wide-eyed and curious. His attention slid over people in quick passes, landing on hands, pockets, the angle of a chair. He had the bored, restless focus of someone who trusted a perimeter someone else had set, but still counted every exit. I already knew he was with the consulate. Men like that never walked into my bar without calling ahead. Osvaldo caught my eye from behind the counter and gave the smallest tilt of his head toward the American. "Our code. Your man is here. You sure about this?" I wasn't sure about much these days, but I walked over anyway. The bar was one of the few places left where people didn't use my name out loud. Low thatched roof, fans that barely moved the heavy air, river traffic sliding by beyond the warped planks of the deck. An old television played a flamenco game with the sound off. Most of the tables held caboclos passing through, loaders from the docks, girls between shifts. The table the American had taken was usually mine. I dragged the plastic chair opposite him back a little. It gave the usual crack under my weight, that small warning that it might finally give up and dump me on the floor. "Posso?" I nodded at the chair. "Claro." His accent was smooth enough to fool anyone who hadn't grown up along 3 borders. Up close, he was mid-40s, pale hair cut close, lines at the corners of his eyes that didn't match the tropical shirt. His watch was plain, but the skin under the band was lighter, like he'd only started dressing down this week. He gave me a professional little smile. "Senor Costa." His Portuguese sounded like it belonged on a government form. "Thank you for meeting me." I lifted one shoulder. "You weren't easy to ignore." He glanced towards the bar where Osvaldo pretended to wipe already clean glasses. "We thought a less formal location might be best, after your recent challenges with the licensing authorities." That was one word for it. Challenges. People talk. I kept my expression flat. Most of what they say is wrong. Some isn't. "What do they tell you?" He slid a card across the table. The laminate caught the last of the daylight, making the seal look like an oil slick. United States Consulate. Vice Consul. His name in neat black type. "Daniel Price. We have mutual interests." I looked at the card, then at him. I didn't know the United States cared about men with irregularities in their paperwork. A faint line deepened beside his mouth. Amusement or annoyance at having to play along. Under normal circumstances, perhaps not. But you know this region, its formal channels and its other pathways. You've assisted many foreign visitors with transport and navigation. He said, assist the way a policeman might. It covered a lot, letting a German photographer hide drone parts under cassava crates, guiding a pharmaceutical scout past an indigenous patrol he was supposed to respect. "And now I have no license," I reminded him. "No registered boat, no insurance, and a brother whose name is still on a list at a certain camp in Roraima. You've read the file. I imagine you know my shoe size, too." He opened a thin folder. He didn't show me the contents. The gesture was for him, not me. A script. "You were implicated in an incident at a fuel depot upriver. Property damage, missing inventory, disturbances to the peace." They wrote it that nicely? I sipped warm beer more for something to hold than for the taste. We did nothing anyone here hasn't done. The only difference was who we stole from. The raid had gone badly. A smuggler crew I'd known since we were boys. A federal police officer who thought he was invisible. A foreign subcontractor nobody had met before. The depot burned bright against the Black River, a little war in the middle of nowhere. When it was over, half the crew were dead, the rest scattered, and my name was in the wrong ledger. You were lucky not to be formally charged. Lucky, I repeated. If that's what you call paying to pull my brother out of private custody, so he doesn't die working in someone's mine. I hadn't seen João in person since then. We talked by audio when he could find a signal. His lungs carried the damage of whatever chemicals the camp used to clean their equipment. Every cough turned into numbers in my head. What I owed, who I owed, which names stared out of files like the one in Price's hand. He tapped the folder lightly. Brazilian authorities would be very interested to revisit some loose ends, if it became necessary. There it was. No need to say bribe or extortion, just leverage. I let the quiet sit between us. Insects droned outside. Someone broke a pool rack at the back of the bar. My anger was old now. It didn't flare, it just settled deeper. You mentioned mutual interests, I said. What do you want moved? Price closed the folder and reached into his bag. He laid out several glossy sheets, weighting them with his glass so the corners stayed flat. Satellite prints. The good kind. Not the blurry ones sold at tourist stalls. Forest canopy from straight above, rivers reduced to brown ropes thrown into green. This is a health and biodiversity survey, he said. Joint research with Brazilian partners. Climate change adaptation, novel species. We require a guide familiar with river conditions and local communities, and someone who can avoid unnecessary attention. You come highly recommended. The words skimmed past me. My eyes were on the third sheet. There, the forest broke. Under the canopy, finer shadows traced angles that didn't belong to trees or streams. Squares, rectangles, a long narrow shape like a bunker half hiding under leaves. The canopy looked unbroken. No roads, no clearings. But something flat lay beneath, geometry under the mess. In the margins, ghostly lines of old ink lurked under modern annotations. Stamped Cyrillic, faded radar contours, new data layered on old secrets. I thought this was untouched forest. I nodded at the shapes. That's what the NGOs say. It's classified state land, patrolled, not occupied. Indigenous territory. I didn't bother to soften it. They don't like men in uniforms there, or men with accents like mine. We have arrangements. Certain federal police units, certain local stakeholders. You won't be disturbed. He spoke of arrangements like a blanket. For me, they were a fire. One misstep, and everything went up. I traced a pale, snaking line that must be the river. The coordinates he'd marked led up an unnamed side channel past the spots where I usually turned back, into one of those white spaces on the official map that no one admits is real. How much? He named a sum. Osvaldo glanced over when he saw my face. The number was more than I'd made in 3 years of legal guiding. Enough to pay Joao's debts, grease hands in Manaus, disappear into some border town where my name hadn't arrived. Far too much for a simple environmental survey. You know this is insane. You know your current options are constrained. Price folded his hands. You're a practical man. Sometimes we work with imperfect partners to protect what we can. He leaned in a fraction. The fans above us barely stirred the air. Outside, the river was turning from grey to black. Your brother's position can be regularized, he went on. Outstanding questions about your role at the depot can remain questions. In return, you do what you've always done. You guide, you keep your head down, you tell no one. He didn't say what would happen if I refused. I looked at the prints again. Old stories flowed through river towns. Soviet projects buried in jungle, concrete blocks where no Brazilian engineer had worked. In the 80s, strange money passed here. Everyone knew some version of that ghost history, but maps that pretended nothing was there, that was different. This route, I tapped the line. No patrol boats, no Funi posts, no indigenous scouts on the banks. We've conducted overflights, no significant human presence. Which could mean sacred land. minds, or something people with sense avoided. If anything goes wrong out there, no one will admit this happened, I said. No one will come looking. His gaze sharpened. The smile slipped. You aren't in a position to bargain for guarantees, he answered. There will be a team, qualified personnel. They know their business. You bring them in, you bring them out. You get paid. And you gain some peace. Peace. For him it was a word. For me it was Joao's breath and my own skin. I thought of Joao on a camp cot, turning every conversation back to football. Thought of the depot raid, flames bending in night wind, the faces of the dead following me even after my forearm scar healed. There comes a point when the path behind you narrows until it's as dangerous as the one ahead. You don't choose safety anymore. You choose which risk you can live with. I want the money in advance, half transferred before we leave, half when we arrive at the site, through clean accounts, and proof about my brother's status. You're not in a position to make demands. I'm the only man with a boat who'll take you up that channel without talking to the people who live along it, I replied. And the only one stupid enough to say yes. That's worth something. He watched me, weighing it, then nodded once. You'll have confirmation before we board. We meet tonight, after midnight, at the derelict pier upriver. Discretion is vital. Of course, not at the crowded dock where every fish seller would see the Americans. At the ghost pier near the old refinery, where no one went anymore because the pilings were rotten and the dead security cameras still stared. He gathered his prints, leaving one in front of me. Memorize the channel, current, depth. Past a certain point there will be no GPS. Too noisy. I didn't ask what he meant. He left American bills under his glass for Osvaldo, far more than the drink cost, and walked out into the thickening dark. When he'd gone, Osvaldo drifted over, pretending he was in no hurry. He glanced at the print. You going back to work? That's one word for it. You know those gringos burn everything they touch. His voice stayed low. You go upriver with them. They won't remember your name when they write their report. If I don't go, someone else will. Let someone else be the name they forget. I folded the print and slid it into my jacket. I'll settle my tab. If this goes well, I might even pay ahead for a month. He snorted. You talk like a man walking onto a storm dock without looking at the sky. I've been looking at the sky all my life. It never changed anything. He watched me leave. If I didn't come back, the story in this bar would be simple. Bruno finally pushed his luck too far. In my world, that isn't tragedy. It's just math. The ghost pier lived up to its name. By the time I walked down the weed-cracked road toward the river, the moon was high, flattening the rusted rails and broken cranes into bone shapes. The old refinery bulked behind me, black towers and empty windows. Farther downriver, Manaus glowed. Here there were only a few sodium lamps and the green eyes of moored boats. My boat waited under the sagging pier, 36 feet of patched metal and stubborn luck, once blue, now more rust than paint. I'd stripped the license numbers after the depot affair, but a man who knew boats would still recognize the lines. A low, dark launch was already tied alongside, foam bumpers around the hull. Men in plain clothes moved gear over, hard cases with US codes on tape, black duffels, long stiff bundles that weren't fishing poles. One of the Americans looked up as I stepped onto the planks. Stocky, late 20s, cropped hair, watchful. His right hand hovered near the pistol at his hip. You Costa? His Portuguese had rough edges. That's me. I went down the ladder to my deck, feeling the hull shift under my boots. Another man stood near the wheelhouse, older, stiller, dark cargo pants, plain shirt, sidearm worn with the confidence of use. His hair had gone silver at the temples, eyes the colour of river mud and far colder. He watched me like an engine he wasn't sure would make the trip. That's him, the younger one confirmed in English. The older man gave a short nod. Cole, I run this team, you run the boat. We stay out of each other's way unless there's a problem. His Portuguese was worse than Price's, so he switched to English once he saw I understood. I prefer to know the men I work with. Names, roles. He jerked his chin at the stocky one. Harris, Sensors and Tech. Back there. Ortega. A wiry man with a Brazilian face and American haircut, rifle hanging easy and ready. Local fix. Paperwork and contacts if we hit trouble. A fourth Brazilian, Lucio, hovered near the gear piles, lighter build, eyes always on the paperwork cases instead of the guns. He had the quiet, efficient air of a man who knew which doors to knock on and which to pretend didn't exist. Another man climbed over from the launch, hauling a silver case covered in biohazard stickers. Late 30s, glasses, the hunch of a man used to benches, not boats. Dr. Robert Ross. He caught his breath. Epidemiology. I handle sampling and environmental assessments. You must be Bruno. You tell me where you need to go. I tell you what you can do without ending up in someone's crosshairs. His smile was thin. That's the plan. Cole checked his watch, then the dark shoreline. No one moved up there except a stray dog in the trash. We're on schedule. Costa, you prepped for 6 days. Fuel, water, food for 5, more if we stretch, if nothing breaks. Nothing's going to break. Harris patted the railing like a charm. Up close, he had a boyish face and the first small lines between his brows. Boat like this, man. It's solid steel. That steel's seen things your manuals don't cover. Don't insult her. He chuckled, already keyed up. Teach me how not to get killed out there. I'll buy her a fresh coat of paint when we get back. The confidence of someone who'd never buried a friend in river mud. Price appeared at the top of the ladder, wind tugging his shirt. He held a slim envelope. Bruno, before you cast off. I joined him. He handed me the envelope. Inside were transfer confirmations, official letterheads, a scanned note from a ministry clerk I knew by reputation. Words like reviewed, closed, no further action at this time. At the bottom, between bureaucratic phrases, my brother's name appeared as part of an administrative action. Relocated to monitored outpatient care. His case slid from punishment to paperwork. Better than a camp in the middle of nowhere. Still a lifetime from free. I folded the papers. Half the fee is in the account, Price said. The rest when you return here with them alive. And if I don't return? Then the operation never happened. That's also what you'll say if I do. He almost smiled. Possibly. But your brother will still be breathing, and you'll have options again. He looked past me at Cole. You have 6 days. After that, people start asking questions I don't want to answer. We'll be out of your hair before then. I went back down. We pushed off with minimal noise. Cole wanted no lights. We moved as a darker shadow on the river, the city glow falling behind us. Harris stood near the prow with a handheld sweeping arcs. Ortega watched through night vision, rifle resting on the rail. Ross hovered by the cabin, hugging his case. You found it again, he murmured, watching the banks slide by. After everything. It found me. He studied my face like he could read more than bad decisions there. Your brother, he said. Hard place, those camps. You have camps like that too, I told him. You just call them something nicer. His fingers tightened on the case handle. The engine's vibration climbed through my boots. I steered us past the last lights, into the wide black of the main river, then toward an invisible seam where a smaller current slipped in. Tourists never felt those shifts. They saw one endless expanse of water. To me, each tributary had its own weight and pull. This one was shy at first, then greedy, tugging at the bow. Behind us, the ghost pier and Price's silhouette disappeared. Ahead, the forest shoulders leaned closer. I'd spent my life guiding men who didn't belong here. Oil surveyors, drug couriers, pastors, NGO idealists. I knew the rules that kept each type alive long enough to pay me. Looking at Cole's profile, sharp in the sat phone glow, I knew none of those rules would help where we were going. The Americans thought they were prepared. Weapons, gear, procedures. Preparation only matters if you understand the thing you're walking into. The river narrowed, the banks drawing together like teeth. Somewhere unseen, a frog croaked once, twice, counting us. We left Manaus behind, and with it the last witnesses to whatever story this would be. The first day upriver flowed almost like any other run, if you didn't look hard. We slept in snatches, anchored in a quiet bend, then moved again with the light. I kept us in the main channel, along sandbars and swing points my hands knew. Fishermen watched us pass, eyes catching on foreign faces, then sliding away. They'd learned like I had. Some questions shorten your life. Harris spent hours behind a thermal camera mounted near the wheelhouse, muttering coordinates. At first his screen showed what I expected. Fish, capybara, caiman on logs. "Nothing weird yet," he reported. "Yet," Ross answered, leaning over the display. Cole ran short security briefings on the deck while I kept one hand on the wheel. "No shooting without positive ID in my order," he told them. "Call out human contact. Ortega leads on rules of engagement." "Last thing we need is to piss off some local militia," Ortega added. "And if we see indigenous patrols—" Harris tried to sound casual. "Then you keep your barrel at the deck and you let our friend here talk." Cole jerked his chin at me. "If they talk." "You can't shoot your way through that kind of problem," I said. Harris shifted. "Copy." Later, under the awning, Ross asked about the channel ahead. "These communities upriver, how much contact have they had with outsiders?" "Enough to know your flag," I answered. "Enough to know most of what comes with it is bad. We're not here to harm anyone. That's not your decision alone." He took that, frowning, then tried again. "How far have you taken people past the last Funai post?" "Farther than you're paying me for now." "And what did you see?" "Trees, water, men like you thinking they're in control." On the second day, we turned. On my chart, the tributary barely had a line. I'd only gone that way twice, and both times I'd turned back long before Price's coordinates. The entry hid under overhanging branches. From the main river, it looked like nothing. As we slipped in, everything changed. The big channel behind us was wide, lazy, full of logs and trash. This one was tight, nervous, nibbling at the hull. The forest leaned in, layered green rising like walls. Sunlight came in thin sheets through leaves browned by the water. Life along the banks thinned. Fewer canoes pulled up at roots, no bright shirts moving in the undergrowth, no plastic bottles in eddies. "It's like somebody closed a door," Harris murmured, glued to his thermal. "What do you see?" Ross asked. "Only diffuse warmth in the understory. Usual animal signatures way down. It's like everything's on standby." "Or very quiet," I said. Around a tight bend, roots knuckled into the water. Something scraped under the hull with a long drag. "That's not a sandbar." I eased the throttle. The boat ground once, shuddering, then slid free. The engine's note shifted in a way I didn't like. "What was that?" Harris leaned over the side. "Roots, maybe. Sometimes banks collapse, trees go down whole." "Roots don't usually feel like woven rope," Ross murmured. I agreed, but kept it to myself. The signs worsened as the day went. On animal trails at the waterline, vines formed deliberate loops at chest height. I watched a small troop of monkeys along one path. The lead adult ducked under with barely a change in posture. The next copied him. A juvenile misjudged, throat striking the vine. It thrashed, eyes wide, legs kicking. The vine flexed, then cinched. The others scattered. I didn't point it out. Mid-afternoon, something moved at us. We were in a narrow stretch where the forest pressed close enough that a man could have jumped from rail to trunk if he wanted to die. Harris stood near the edge, filming a weirdly uniform curtain of creepers hanging straight as if combed. "Look at that. It's like someone groomed it." As he leaned in, One thick vine snapped sideways with sudden speed like a striking snake. It swept the gunnel and scraped his bare forearm and palm before he jerked back. Shit! He clutched his hand. That thing's stiff as cable. Ross reached him in a few strides, dropping his case, grabbing Harris's wrist. Hold still. Let me see. Fine splinters studded Harris's palm and fingers, pale against reddening skin. They looked like tiny thorns, but when Ross tried to pluck one with tweezers, it wouldn't give. Burns, Harris hissed, like nettles but deeper. Cole scanned the trees, hand near his gun. This normal for you? I've never seen vines aim, I said. They drop, they swing. That thing chose him. Could be touch-triggered reflex, Ross muttered. Fast tension response. Plants can move if the mechanism's right. In our language, Cole threw at him. It moves when something touches it. Fast. That part bothered me less than how the team handled it. Ortega already had a sealed kit open, passing Ross wipes, syringe, labeled vials. Ross dabbed Harris's hand with something that made him flinch, drew blood, careful to include thorn sites. Keep it raised. Any numbness, short breath, you tell me. Harris nodded. This wasn't on your brief, I told Ross quietly. The initial surveys mentioned aggressive flora, he answered, eyes on his work. We pictured thorns, toxic sap, not active movement. We had models, no field observations. So you thought something like this could happen? He met my eyes for a beat. Behind the apology, curiosity burned. We came prepared. That chilled me more than the vine. They hadn't been surprised enough. They'd expected the forest to reach. In the last light of the day, we passed a point I couldn't mark on paper but felt in my bones. Ahead, the trees formed a soft curve, crowns braided by thick creepers into a smooth line. Understory saplings thinned, replaced by slender trunks spaced with unnatural regularity. Sunlight flattened into an even wash. I eased off the throttle. What is it? Cole came up beside me. From here, I murmured. I usually turn back. Why? Some communities say this isn't their land. They drink this water. They don't sleep near it. They say the forest remembers things here they want to forget. How poetic. He nodded forward. We keep going. The current shivered around shapes just under the surface. My palms itched on the wheel. We went. That night we anchored in a small widening of the channel. The banks loomed close. No stars, just a narrow strip of sky. We strung tarp. Ross swept a low-power UV lamp over the deck, watching a handheld meter as invisible dust and spores answered in different bands. Harris slept on his side, bandaged hand on a rolled jacket. I lay on my bunk, listening. Engine metal cooling, water slapping hull, distant frogs. Closer to the waterline, something stroked the steel in slow passes. I told myself it was driftwood and roots. By mid-morning of the third day, the forest shifted. One bend, the trees were the usual mess, giants, mid-trunks, greedy understory. The next, that chaos vanished. The big emergent crowns stopped. From the waterline inward, younger trunks took over, straight and close-spaced, smooth-barked. Their crowns tied together by thick creepers formed a continuous sheet, turning the light into a uniform, indoor glow. No dapples, no sun knives, just an even wash that hid the hour. The ground layer thinned to low ferns and broad, flat-leafed ground cover. It looked manicured, as if someone had walked through with a machete and culled anything off-pattern. I killed the throttle and let us drift. This is wrong. The words slipped out. Define wrong. Cole watched the bank. Nothing grows like this here without tending. Then someone tended it. Our people. He gestured ahead. Keep going. Through binoculars, I picked out shapes along trails. A capybara pinned where a vine looped over its back, sides moving, eyes dull. A monkey held upright by a green noose at its waist. Alive, but still. Waiting. You see that? Ross took the glasses. They grew their snares in place. Or in response. We rounded a last slow curve, and the forest on the right fell away. The blockhouse rose out of the slope like a fist. Concrete stained by years of rain and fungi, sharp angles that made the surrounding trees look uneasy. Squat, low, with narrow slits along its sides, each sealed with metal louvers corroded to a dull matte. A more massive section pushed back into the hill, where the soil bulged as if something beneath had swelled and the jungle skimmed over it. A rusted gantry clung to one side like a barnacle. A concrete apron jutted a few meters, then dropped into a tangle of roots and water plants. From the slots, a dim, steady glow leaked. Faint but undeniably artificial, a tired amber white that belonged to old emergency fixtures grown stubborn. "That place should be dead," I said. "Nothing built here in my father's time should still have power, unless someone left it on standby." Ross's eyes shone in a way I didn't like. Cole studied the bank, the structure, then me. "Where can we land without sinking?" "There." I pointed to a strip of bare earth between roots where the ground cover looked flatter. "Tie to that trunk. Pull in on the line. Watch the edge. The bank might undercut." "You're taking us all the way?" Ortega's tone carried doubt. "If I leave you here now, you'll blunder in and die faster. I don't want your ghosts following me back to Manaus." No one laughed. As we nosed the bow toward shore, a faint, irregular rhythm came up through my boots. Soft thuds with long pauses, weak pumps, giant lungs. I knew engines, generators, diesel knock. This wasn't any of them. The moment the hull scraped mud, vines on nearby trees leaned just a little. We tied off fast. Cole put his people in the arcs, rifle steady. Ortega took the high point on the bank, scanning the tree line. No human shapes moved, only leaves. And across the clearing, half hidden by trunks, a figure watching. At first I thought soldier or another foreigner. Then I saw paint, dark lines across bare skin, a pattern I recognized only from stories. A group that didn't talk to Funai, didn't step onto steel boats, didn't let men like me learn their names. He stood half in shadow, face and chest marked, bow in one hand, arrow nocked but low. He watched us for several heartbeats, then turned and slid between the trees. The forest closed after him like it had never parted. "He saw us," Ortega murmured. "He saw that." I nodded at the blockhouse and decided it wasn't worth an arrow. Whatever's in there, they treat it like a bad memory. "You sure that's what it means?" "They don't fear guns." I looked at the concrete. "They fear this." The knowledge landed in my gut like stone. If the people who'd survived every wave since the first Portuguese boat marked this place as off-limits, why would I fare better? "You can still walk," a voice in my head commented. "Take the boat, leave them, run." Then what? Price would find someone else. Cole still had orders. João would still be a line item on a list. "We set a perimeter here," Cole ordered. "Ortega, Harris, secure between the boat and the slab. Costa, you stay close. Doc, get your air and dust, then we go inside." "You're sure we're going inside?" "We didn't come for exterior shots." Ross set out compact cylinders along the bank. They whirred as they pulled air and dust. He swabbed the strange plants. "There's a gradient." He checked a readout. "Spore density rises near the entrance. Heat from below. Some residual radiation, but not acute. That radiation will bite in 5 years instead of now." 5 years is a luxury. We followed a cracked concrete path half swallowed by roots. Up close, the walls told stories. Strips where moss refused to grow. Streaks where something long ago stained the surface a different shade. Viewing slits clogged with webs and insect husks. Half concealed by creepers as thick as my arm crouched a metal hatch at ground level. Rust, but the seams around it were too clean, soil refusing to settle. "Service entrance," Ross breathed. Cole rapped the metal, listening. Dull and close, then more open. "Crowbar," he called. They wrestled the hatch. Vines resisted like tendon, stretching before several snapped with a dry jerk. When the hinges finally broke free, the hatch opened a palm's width, jammed against something. I shoved with my shoulder. Whatever blocked it scraped aside, and the hatch swung into a short tunnel lined with flaking paint and metal rungs descending into red gloom. A stale draft rolled out, heavy and still. My skin prickled. "You first, boatman." For a few heartbeats I pictured telling him no, untying my lines, pushing off. Let them find their own way into this concrete gut. Then I thought of Joao's cough. "I need light." Harris snapped on a helmet lamp and handed me another. The beam ran down the narrow shaft. The rungs were slick, some bent, like weight had shoved from below. At the bottom, the tunnel turned horizontal. Red strips along the floor woke to us, brightening, then fading, unsure. I put my palm on the wall. The concrete held a quiet warmth, a few degrees above my own skin, like another body pressed on the far side. Bootsteps clanged down behind me, Cole, then Ortega, then Ross and Harris with their cases. "Stay close," Cole murmured. "We map as we go. No wandering." The tunnel spat us into a curve of corridor. Floor strips cast a low red. Overhead, motion sensors tripped and lights flicked on in lazy sequence, some stuttering before they made up their minds. Doors lined both sides, labels curled and flaking. Laboratorio, Manutenção, Armazenagem. Portuguese stencils over older Cyrillic. Some stood ajar. Faint clanks and whirs leaked from a few, like echoes of work that should have stopped decades ago. Others held a silence so thick it felt physical. "Listen," Harris whispered. Above us, through layers of concrete and earth, came the sound of forest. Distant leaves, trunks creaking, water somewhere. The blockhouse didn't sit apart from the jungle. It carried it. I tried to fix the way back in my mind. Paces, turns. But small things kept snagging my attention. A dried handprint on a wall. A row of empty harness hooks gently swinging with no draft. The first tank room stopped us. The door marked Sala de Suspensão had bulged like something pushed from inside. Residue crusted the lower edge. Cole nudged it open with his barrel. Inside, glass cylinders lined both walls, tall enough for a man, braced in a web of metal arms and tubing. Some still held cloudy fluid, cables running from their tops into the ceiling. Others had cracked or shattered. Contents dumped onto the floor. Bodies hung in the intact tanks. Human shapes, but wrong at the edges. Skin too pale, limbs slightly too long. Fingers spread into broad, flat pads pressed to the glass. Thick, greenish cables ran from wall ports into their backs, throats, thighs, pinning them like stakes. Tufts of hair floated around skulls, some pierced with fine roots. Their eyes were open. They weren't asleep. Pupils clouded but tracking in tiny arcs as our beams cut past. Mouths slack, lips parted as if they'd forgotten about speech halfway through. Ross stepped forward like pulled. "Jesus," he breathed. "They finished it. Tell me this isn't what it looks like." The documents called them autotrophic humanoid units. His voice retreated into clinical distance. Designed to survive post-nuclear environments, live on sunlight and minimal nutrients, anchor fortifications with their own bodies. I thought it never left paper. He glanced up at the fixtures above the tanks. Some still glowed faint green-white, bathing the forms in sick light. They gave them artificial sun, nutrient loops through those lines. After a strike, logistics would break. They wanted soldiers who could plug into the ground and keep a perimeter standing. "Tree people turned concrete people," Harris muttered. In the shattered tanks, the contents hadn't stayed put. Where glass had blown, masses of root-like tissue spilled out and merged into heaps. Bits of bone jutted here and there, a rib, a kneecap embedded in woody knots. Limbs had stretched beyond normal anatomy, joints elongated, fingers flattened more, pressed into concrete. In places, the floor had cracked under their slow insistence. An automated arm slid along a ceiling track, still running a program. Its gripper opened and closed on empty air. It passed over one spill, sensors tripped, and tried to push a tendril back toward a port that no longer existed. The heap twitched, more like a plant adjusting to light than an animal startled. "We're not here to sightsee." Cole swept his beam. "Doc, how much do you need from this circus?" Ross tore his gaze from a tank where the occupant's flesh had gone almost transparent, fine green filaments visible like a second circulation. "Tissue, fluid, swabs. Maybe see if any control interfaces respond." "You have an hour. Then we move on. Harris, Ortega, watch the corridor. Costa, you stick with him. If something moves in here that isn't bolted down, I want to know." Ross went to work. Vials of suspension fluid, scrapings of that woody flesh, smears from cracked glass. His hands stayed steady. His eyes didn't. We stopped beside a tank where the body had long since overgrown its hardware. Roots erupted from every port, climbing the inside, turning the cylinder into a cage. The torso had split, ribs pried open, internal space filled with thick cords. As Ross murmured into his recorder, chlorophyll expression, lignification, self-repair, Harris edged closer to a broken heap. "Get me a wide on the main bundle," Ross called without looking. "On it." Harris stepped forward, planting his foot on what he took for dried spill. The surface gave, then tightened. I saw the tremor in one thicker tendril, a heartbeat before it moved. He hesitated that fatal fraction. The tendril whipped. It looped around his boot, then his lower leg, clamping just below the knee. Harris dropped the camera, tried to kick. The more he fought, the deeper it burrowed, fine filaments sprouting, probing. "Hold still!" Ross lunged. The sealing arm, still on its cycle, glided down. Its sensors read sudden motion as a subject adjustment. The metal hand pressed on Harris's thigh, pinning him deeper into the living mass. The tissue reacted greedily, sensing more contact. Thinner tendrils curled up around his calf and knee, hunting seams in his pants. "Get it off! Get it off!" His voice broke. Cole was already firing, controlled bursts at the thickest part where plant met plant. Splinters flew. The mass convulsed, constricting once around Harris's leg before slackening. "Grab him!" Ross snapped. I waded in, ignoring the stench and the feel. My hands slid under Harris's arms and back. Muscles jumped under my grip. Ortega and another man grabbed his belt and the free leg. "On 3, 1, 2, we heaved. The tendrils stretched like taffy, then snapped with wet pops. Fine filaments tore from skin in stringy lines. As we dragged him clear, something thin and cool brushed my wrist. A tiny sting. I barely registered it, focused on Harris as the last strands ripped free. We crashed into the corridor wall. Harris's boot left a smear of viscous fluid. "Hold him!" Ross dropped to the floor. "Leg!" We got Harris prone. He shook, breath ragged, sweat shining. His pants had shredded around the calf. Punctures dotted his skin in a rough spiral. Ross slit the cloth away. Several thicker tendrils came with it. Their tips sunk a centimeter under skin. They stretched, then snapped, leaving pale cores that slid deeper into the puncture tracks. "Don't move!" Ross's voice stayed tight. "If they anchor deeper, we have a worse problem." He dug with forceps and scalpel, pulling what he could. Some threads broke, retreating under the surface. Harris bit into a rag, eyes wild. "You got them?" Cole hovered. "Most. Some already in the subcutaneous layers. They'll either be rejected or adapt." "That's not comforting," Harris rasped. "We'll watch and intervene." Ross wrapped the leg hard and injected a ring of drug around the worst sites. He cleaned his own gloves carefully. My wrist itched. I rolled my sleeve. A narrow welt marked the inside, pale against my skin. At the center, a pinprick of green glowed like the start of a new vein. I yanked the sleeve down. "The samples here are enough," Cole said. "Doc?" "We've got baseline," Ross admitted, eyes still on Harris. If we can reach the nerve center, you can write papers on what we already risked. Next, find what drives this. Power, control. Then we see if we can kill it or box it. He looked at me. You know facilities like this. Where do they keep the main systems? Deep, I said. Where the temperature stays steady. Under everything. Then that's where we're going. We were already inside the beast. The question was whether we'd find a way back up its throat. As we moved deeper, my wrist tingled again, a faint rhythm out of sync with my pulse. We camped that night in an upper corridor between the hatch and a heavier blast door propped open for now. They cleared 2 side rooms, sealed vents with mesh and tape. Harris lay in an improvised infirmary, leg elevated, bandages already showing faint green stains. Ross sat beside him, checking vitals, giving numbered doses. "So this is hazard pay," Harris muttered. "Tell my mum it was for science." "You're not dying tonight." Ross didn't bother with soothing. "We'll watch for systemic changes. Any new feeling, you tell me." "Define new. My leg feels like it's full of electric ants." "Anything in your chest, difficulty swallowing, changes in sight or hearing, or impulses that don't feel like yours." "You mean wanting to eat fertilizer?" He tried for a grin and failed. While they talked, I slipped into the corridor and checked my wrist. A faint network of darker lines radiated from the welt, barely visible unless you looked. They traced alongside veins, but weren't veins, not beating with my heart. They lay there, steady, like ink under the skin. The spot felt warmer, the tissue under it dense, almost woody. I should have spoken up. Another, older part of me whispered, "Information is power. As long as they don't know, you choose when to use it." In the common area, Cole had made a little command post. Soviet diagrams scavenged from a cabinet layered with fresh English stickers. "Coolant loops here," he traced with a gloved finger. "Nutrient feeds, light arrays for main growth chambers, and here, primary distribution hub." "A brain?" Ortega asked. "More a pump station," Ross answered. He'd scrubbed his hands until the skin reddened, but faint green still showed under nails. "Central control, easier to shut down if something rebels. You think there's a big root ball making decisions?" Cole frowned. "Plant networks can process information, electrical signals, chemical gradients. This is that idea turned into infrastructure. They tried to graft a new nervous system onto their assets. The system adjusted." "Can we cut it?" Cole asked. "Maybe. Sever enough artificial support. Lights, nutrients, and complex nodes could break coordination. Fall back to simpler growth. Threat drops, in theory." "You're treating this like a power plant," I said. "What do you think it is?" I thought of vines testing the hull, animals held but not killed. The exact line where old forests stopped and new began. "It feels like territory learning us," I said. "Baiting, measuring, adjusting." "All the more reason to limit its range," he replied. "Tomorrow we go down," Cole decided. "Small team. Ross for brains, Costa for legs, Ortega for guns. The rest hold here and keep our exit open." "I'm coming," Harris called from the infirmary. "No. You're our canary now. You stay." The argument fizzled quickly. Cole's will weighed more than anyone's pride. As night settled, the blockhouse changed. Vines outside rasped along sealed windows, searching. Filaments seeped through grills like mist, weaving delicate nets overhead. The air grew charged, exposed skin prickled, eyes itched. Masks and goggles came out. The elastic bit into sweat-slick hair and skin. The small portable scrubbers hummed, trading a little clean air for more noise. In the infirmary, Harris stared at the light over his cot like a man on a beach watching the moon. "How you feeling?" I asked. "Better if I don't move." He didn't look away. "Doc says that's sedative talking, but it feels like if I stay real still, everything lines up." He pulled the blanket off his leg. Under the bandages, faint forms writhed. "Cover that," I told him. "I need it in the light." His voice had gone too calm. "Feels wrong when it's dark." "Harris." I stepped closer. "I've heard Fever talk like this. That's not you choosing. That's it choosing." He blinked, finally dragged his gaze to me. "You ever think we got the metaphors wrong?" he whispered. "We talk like the forest is asleep till we wake it with chainsaws, but it's already awake, just paying attention somewhere else, until we walk in at the wrong angle. You should rest." He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them back to the light. No one slept much. Sometime in the dark hours, a man screamed at the far end of the corridor. I grabbed my machete out of old habit and ran. Ortega reached the door first. One of the quiet Americans thrashed on his mat, ankles wrapped in a tangle of fine tendrils that had crept under the door. They'd wound around his socks and started working between cloth and skin. Cole slashed them with a knife, then fired a short burst into the mat where they fed under the frame. The growth recoiled, more automatic withdrawal than pain. Ortega ripped the strands free and stomped them to pulp. "Check vents," Cole ordered. We did. Where we'd taped mesh in haste, small gaps gaped. New filaments pressed each opening like fingers exploring a lock. "Welding kits, block the obvious routes. Air through the filters. Nothing else. You seal everything. Whatever's already inside stays with us," I pointed out. "Then we deal with that." For the next hour, the corridors filled with the glare of portable welders, sparks bouncing off damp concrete. The heat drove some filaments back, but made the air heavier, the masks more claustrophobic. When we finished, even the faint draft died. Scrubbers hummed louder in the stillness. Back in the infirmary, Harris's leg had changed. Green threads under his skin had crept from calf toward thigh, in fine branching patterns, weaving around veins. His skin over them gleamed like it held a thin film. When Ross pressed along one of the larger tracks, it compressed and sprang back, neither flesh nor wood. "How's the pain?" Ross perched on the chair, pen ready. "It isn't." Harris flexed his toes slowly. "Was fire. Now it's cool, like hanging your feet over a boat." "Any numbness?" "I feel everything. I just don't want to move it." Ross pulled the sheet lower. The tendrils from the floor had been cut when we sealed the room, their stubs pressed against the cot frame. New filaments already curled up the metal legs, searching. "They're using him," I said, "like a pipe." "We're seeing integration," Ross answered. "Flow both ways. We need to understand it. You need to decide if he's still one of us or already one of them." His eyes flashed. For a heartbeat, we stood on opposite sides of an old argument. Cole dragged the question into the open later. "We have to think worst case," he told us. "If he turns into some anchor or control point, we're finished." "Bridge," I translated. "He's not gone yet," Ross pushed back. "We don't know the slope. This could plateau, even reverse if we cut more artificial loops." "You don't know," Cole cut him off. "What I know is, I can't carry a mobile hazard through our exit." "You're weighing him like a spoiled sample." "I'm weighing risk. They send me to be the bastard who doesn't flinch." "Maybe you should flinch sometimes," I said. His look held something like respect and dislike layered together. "The kid's a liability. If you saw the bigger picture, you'd see that. I see it fine. Men like you draw lines on maps, call inside your problem and outside someone else's. Harris isn't my brother, but I know when someone's past saving." "What are we looking at then?" he pressed. I thought of Harris's calm stare and the way roots under his cot had found him. "By sunrise, he won't be asking us what to do," I said. "Whatever's under his skin will already have decided." We left it hanging. There was too much else. When the others finally drifted into thin sleep, I went back to the infirmary. Harris lay flat, breathing slow. His eyes were half open, pupils wide. His leg, uncovered again, angled toward the overhead strip, like it had aligned to the light. "Hey." I dragged a chair close. "You awake?" Sort of. He rolled his gaze toward me. You understand what's happening? He glanced at his leg, then back. Doc narrates. I get the gist. I'm becoming part of it. You don't sound bothered. Feels peaceful. A small smile touched his mouth. Like floating in a pool when I was a kid. Water holds you, no edges. That voice isn't you, I told him. It's it. Maybe. Or maybe I'm tired of fighting everything. He swallowed with effort. Look, I know how this script runs. There's a point where it isn't a condition anymore, it's a change. You don't leave the room unless someone makes a hard call. I watched him. What do you want? He drew a shallow breath. I don't want to wake up and be something else. I don't want to hurt my people because you all couldn't act. If it comes to that, I'd rather it be quick, with someone I trust. He gave a broken laugh. Stupid, huh? I barely know you and I'm asking you that. I've done worse for worse reasons, I said. You're not the first man I've watched turn into someone or something else because we left him too long. In the jungle, in a cell, in debt. In the emergency tray, Ross had left a sedative strong enough to stop a heart if mishandled. My fingers closed around the vial and syringe. This will stop your breathing, I told him. Fast if I do it right. He looked at the needle, then at me. Fear flickered, but he didn't look away. Do it before I lose my nerve. I swabbed a spot on his arm out of habit. I'm sorry. Nothing to be sorry for. His voice thinned. Don't let them turn me into a petri dish. His eyes met mine, clear. I slipped the needle in. It didn't take long. His chest rose twice more, then stayed. His eyes fixed on something distant. I sat there while the strip light buzzed and my wrist burned. Ross found us like that. What did you do? He came fast to the bedside. He asked me to spare him what was coming. He checked pulse and lids, though he knew. You interrupted the progression, he choked out. We needed to see. He was a man, I cut him. Not one of your tanks. He didn't want to be a bridge. You don't get to decide that. His voice shook with anger. We just lost a critical observation point. That choice goes beyond your conscience. I've lived with worse. He stared at me, eyes bright, fury drowning any grief. Maybe you were merciful, he said. You were also selfish. Don't pretend otherwise. Then put that in your report. Outside the welded doors, the forest pressed closer. It had all the time in the world. We didn't. We descended the next day. Ross, however angry, still needed a guide. The maps were knots, labels incomplete. Some corridors collapsed. Without someone who could read settled dust and fresher growth, they'd wander until something found them. Our team, Ross, me, Ortega with his rifle, and Lucio, the quiet Brazilian fixer who'd been hovering over the gear at the pier. I'd marked him as a logistics man. He carried a shotgun and coil of rope with white knuckles. Cole stayed topside with the rest, watching tree line and their shrinking perimeter. Radio check every 10, he told us at the stairhead. Any gap longer? I assume you're part of the decor. Reassuring, I muttered. He looked once at my covered wrist. You good, Costa? Fine. He didn't believe me, but nodded anyway. Bring back a way to shut this thing down, he said, or at least put it under. We went. The deeper levels clung to the skin, the air turned wetter and hotter. Emergency lights here flickered less, as if the power source favored the core. The walls changed. Upstairs they were plain concrete and peeling paint. Down here roots had forced their way in. Thick fibrous bundles crawled along corners, bulging under paint, cracking it. Old hazard symbols lay half buried in knotted growth. We passed a storage bay where shelves had collapsed under a creeping mass that turned cardboard to mulch and welded metal into its own tissue. A shovel handle stuck out at an angle, half digested. They should have buried this and salted it, Lucio muttered. As if salt matters, I thought. Ross moved like a man in a chapel, reverent, afraid. Each grotesquerie tugged at him. He forced himself on. Here, He stopped at a heavy door with a radiation trefoil, now laced with thin roots. Primary control. The mechanical wheel resisted. Ortega and I leaned in until the seal shrieked and broke. The door swung open. The control room looked like the bottom of a drained aquarium. Consoles lined the walls but had warped where roots pressed up from below. Chairs bolted to the deck, now fused with growth spilling over them. The ceiling sagged under hanging bundles that had punched through panels. In the center sat chair-like nests, once operator stations, molded for human backs. Now each bulged with living tissue that had filled every curve, swelled over armrests, crawled up supports. In one, a torso remained, fused at pelvis and spine. The man, whatever was left, leaned back, arms gone above the biceps, shoulders encased in rough, bark-like mass. His chest cavity lay open, ribs bowed. What should have been lungs were now thick, pulsing sacs threaded through with vines. They rose and fell slowly, dragging air through an opening that had been a mouth, and now was just another port. His eyes, milky, tracked in small jerks when our lights touched him. A wet gurgle emerged, somewhere between speech and wind in reeds. Lucio crossed himself and tightened his shotgun. Reflex arcs, Ross said, though conviction was thin. Feedback loops, the system using leftover tissue. He's aware, I said. Just doesn't know how to be human. Ross tore his gaze away and focused on consoles. We work fast, power routing, coolant, nutrient feeds. We picked our way between root masses. Some surfaces still glowed, Cyrillic labels with crooked English stickers. Main generator. He stabbed a finger at one panel. Those pipes, original coolant, probably repurposed. How do you know what to cut? I asked. We don't. We infer from schematics. Cut gradually. Watch what happens. Roulette with roots, Lucio muttered. Plants are resilient. You can prune them hard, but change enough, fast enough. You disrupt coordination. That's all we need. He put Ortega on the door, eyes on corridor and the fused operator. Lucio and I took heavy cutters to lines Ross pointed out. Feeds for light arrays, trunks of fluid. The first cut dimmed corridor lights a shade. Somewhere a pump rattled, coughed off. The second made a wall bundle recoil, then send fine probes toward the break. The third sent a shudder through the chairman. His vine lungs contracted roughly. Green fluid trickled from his mouth. It's adjusting, Ross murmured. Rerouting. How does that help? I demanded. It proves central processing. If it can adapt, it can be overloaded. He moved to a console with 3 big switches and a row of small, local breakers. We cut supply here, see if the system degrades, then decide on a full trip. Plain. We throw some switches and watch whether the forest weakens or tightens. While we worked, something else woke in me. At first it was a faint hum, like standing near high-tension wire. Then, behind my eyes, brief flashes. Corridors I hadn't walked, junctions deeper in, roots tightening and loosening, water moving along channels beyond any pipe. I froze. Costa? Ross's eyes were on me. You okay? Fine. But when I reached for the next conduit, my hand hovered. I knew that cutting that one would shift something near the infirmary above, closing a path. Cutting the adjacent line would open a different one. I chose the second, without understanding why. When it parted, the man in the chair hissed. The mass above his head tightened, then relaxed, like a cleared blockage. What did you do? Ross demanded. You told me which to cut. He compared conduit to diagram, then to me. You hit the backup instead of the primary. That's probably better. Less shock. Probably. The word sat between us. We went on. Cut. Observe. Adjust. The blockhouse shivered. At one point, Ross and I had to haul down a heavy manual lever across the far wall, a relic from an older design. It fought us like an old bone. As we pull this, some automated systems will drop, Ross warned through clenched teeth. Lights, maybe some pumps. The lever gave with a grunt. Somewhere in the foundations something groaned. Dust rained. The chairman convulsed. Cole's voice cracked on my radio. Report, we just had part of a corridor cave in near the upper deck. What the hell did you change? We're cutting power to central arrays, Ross answered fast. Some structural systems are tied in. Translation. We're trying to weaken it, I cut in. It objects. No kidding. We've got vines testing welds everywhere and something big under the clearing. Make it count. The last step lay beyond the control room. According to the diagrams, a final manual override, old analog engineering, waited in a maintenance alcove past the primary hub. A kill lever meant to drop non-essential power in a hurry. Reaching it meant crawling through a throat of wood and concrete. The corridor had buckled under root pressure. Floor heaved in ridges, ceiling sagged, bundles hanging low. In places we had to turn sideways. Ross hesitated. That's dense. We can go around, Lucio offered. There is no around we can reach in time. He looked at me. Your call? I closed my eyes. For a moment, the whole blockhouse overlaid itself inside my head like a thermal map. Lines of warmth through walls and floors, connecting nodes. The passage ahead glowed thick. If we reach that lever, we won't just change this building, I said. We'll change everything wired into it. You're guessing, Ortega muttered. We've been guessing since Manaus. Ross studied my face, gaze catching on the shadow under my sleeve. You're feeling something new, he said. Yes. And you think you know what flipping that does? I know it'll rewrite the rules. I don't see outcomes, only paths. We don't have the luxury of caution, he shot back. If we go back now having poked it, we've only made it more alert. We need a real blow. Or we accept we lived long enough to leave, and we walk. I met his eyes. Let the jungle smother this again. Warn anyone who'll listen. And when it reaches the next ridge, when it hits a river and rides it to town, you think Price and his kind won't come back with bigger toys. We're not the first idiots down here. We might be the last who can throttle what grows out of their mistakes. Something stubborn in me responded to that. The same part that thought paying for Joao's release would keep him safe. Fine, we go. We squeezed in. Roots pressed against shoulders and hips, rough then slick. Some patches felt like bark, others like damp skin. In one choke point I had to turn my head sideways, breath shallow. Halfway the whole mass flexed. Not an earthquake, a muscle. For an instant the walls squeezed, then eased. Keep moving. Ortega's voice was steady by force. We crawled into a cramped alcove. A single massive lever dominated one wall, locked upright with a rusted pin. Russian on either side, one of Ross's stickers below. Main auxiliary cutoff. This is it. We worked the pin out with bleeding fingers. It came free with a scream. The lever itself felt welded in place. We threw our weight. Resistance, then a brutal give. Something deep below sang. A high, keening note rose from the concrete. Lights in the alcove flared, died, then the floor strips crawled back to a lower glow. My arm lit up with pain, every nerve buzzing. Cole's voice hit my ear. What did you just do? The whole forest blinked, roots, branches. The lot pulsed like a damn circuit board. We diverted power, Ross gasped, gripping the lever. Coolant loops now carry bare electrical charge. We thought it would burn internal nodes. And it looks like we gave them a new way to talk. We scrambled back through the choking corridor. In the control room, the man in the chair was changing. His vine lungs pumped faster on a new rhythm. The vines thickened. His eyes, once milk white, now had small black pupils tracking us with terrible clarity. He opened his mouth. Clicks and wet consonants spilled, layered with a whisper like wind in reeds. I refused to hear language in it. That was one mercy I could give myself. We're leaving, I said. In the outer corridor, a ceiling slab dropped, roots bursting through to block our previous route. We detoured instinctively. following the strange map in my head, down a side passage that had been solid before and now gaped where growth had pulled masonry away. Lucio paused at a delicate pattern of filaments tracing the floor like frost. A tendril reached for his boot. I yanked him back. It brushed my ankle instead. By the time we reached the upper level again, coughing inside our masks, the blockhouse felt different. Vines at windows no longer poked at random. They flowed along welds, wrapping metal, testing every join. Cole met us near the entrance, rifle slung. "You changed the tempo. You asked us to." Ross started in on distributed network and signal propagation. Cole cut through. "Whatever you did, the ring outside is moving, trees shifting, vines thinning in some spots, tangling in others. Animals are being pushed off the clearing, like it's making space." "And inside?" I asked. He jerked his chin toward the infirmary. "Come look at your mercy." Harris's body lay where we'd left him. Someone, Ross probably, had closed his eyes. His leg was no longer just a limb. From the puncture sites, new cords had split skin, curling around the cot frame, plunging through into the floor. Fine tendrils spread from toes and heel, threading into concrete. "He's a bridge now," Ross said, awe souring his voice. "Even after what you call death." "You thanking me for your specimen?" I asked. "No." He didn't look away. "I'm telling you, none of us knows what stable looks like anymore." Under my skin, the network's new pathways thrummed. I realized I could feel where the strongest lines ran. From the core out through coolant trenches into soil, through the altered ring, then stretching toward water. We hadn't cut its nerves, we'd extended them. By late afternoon, the blockhouse was no longer a relic. It was a hub in an awake system, and we were grit in its eye. Cole's sat phone, useless for days, suddenly chimed with cued messages. He stepped away, read them. "Well?" I asked when he came back. "Mission priorities shifted." His voice was flat, surprising nobody. "Meaning?" Ross's shoulders tensed. "Collection takes precedence over containment. We secure portable fragments for exfil and study. Local degradation is optional. Domestic partners will cover and monitor." "Partners," I repeated. "Your federal police friends. And some military." "That wasn't the original plan," Ross snapped. "We were here to assess, not mine." "The plan was always to see if we could take a piece home." Cole didn't blink. "You just preferred another word." He turned to me. "Here it is. We harvest what we can reach without dying. Seal it in these." He jabbed a thumb at reinforced canisters stacked by the hatch, foam-lined, sampling ports, locks. "We get it to the boat. You take us downriver quiet. We hand it to another team. You get paid, your brother's status improves, you vanish somewhere sunny." "And the thing we woke up here?" I asked. "The network we just taught to move power through river mud. What happens to river people when your crates are gone and this keeps spreading? They adapt or don't. That's for your government and NGOs to scream about. My job ends when the sample's on a plane. And if I refuse to help..." His gaze went hard. "Then I kill you, put a gun to Ortega's head and make him drive until we ground out and improvise. Your brother's file goes back active with a red mark." There it was again. No disguise now. Ross watched us, torn. He wanted samples, data, prestige, but I saw him weighing risk and spread too. "You take this thing out, you give it rivers and ports," I told Cole. "You think your labs can pen it in? It'll treat your petri dishes like new soil, and when it leaks, as it always does, it'll remember every channel you used. Above my pay grade. You toss that line like it isn't above mine." He stepped closer. "Help me finish this and maybe you get heard in a room that matters. Refuse, you die here, and your 3 redacted words in a memo." "This is his home," Ross cut in. "He lives with what stays here long after you're back in your suburb." "I live with my missions too," Cole answered, "just from further away." If I refused, Cole would still try to drag something out, stumbling through the forest, maybe dying, maybe not. If I played along, I'd make his path smoother, for us and for it. Or I could aim for something in between, a path that didn't save anyone cleanly but might limit what moved downstream. "I'll help." Ross shot me a sharp look. Cole only nodded, as if nothing else had been realistic. "Good. Start by telling Ortega where the shallowest routes are around the boat. We need a clean lane." I walked down with Ortega and 2 others, machete in hand. The altered ring watched us, crowns bound, light unnaturally even. As we chopped vines from the hull, I paid attention. Some roots were thick, rigid, clearly key lines. Cutting them sent a tremor through everything I could feel. Others were thin and exploratory. I sliced those freely. Underwater, filaments had already crept into bilge intakes and fuel lines. When we pulled a panel, a pale mesh clung to hoses, twitching with each engine vibration. "Cut it all," Ortega grunted. "Not all." I stopped his blade. "These, yes. That one." I pointed at a thicker strand running along the hull into a conduit. "Leave it." "Why?" "If we sever every link, it grows new ones blind. We want some roots where we expect." He frowned, but listened. While we worked, an idea settled. The boat's generator was old but honest. I knew its wiring like most men know their own scars. I could build a feedback loop tying our system into the blockhouse's wounded power, using the root-infested cables as conductors. When Cole demanded everything at once for a fast breakout, generator, pumps, comms, I'd bridge the leads, dumping the blockhouse's own unstable load back into the root mesh under the hull. It would overload weak points, ignite fuel trace, turn our path into a brief furnace. It would likely kill people. It would certainly ruin any neat, controlled extraction, and it might burn enough interface between blockhouse and river to slow the spread. I moved slowly. I suggested where to park the portable generators so they'd stabilize blockhouse power. I steered certain leads into certain junctions. I left some tendrils wrapped on key cables. In my engine room, I loosened fittings, crossed wires that should never meet, checked fuel lines for plant tissue, and left some. Ross caught me crouched over an open panel. "What are you doing?" "Making sure we don't die when the pump quits." He watched a moment longer than casual. "You don't plan to let them leave with this, do you?" he asked quietly. "I plan to make sure no one controls it," I said. "Not them, not you, not anyone whose office has air conditioning. You think a blown boat stops it? I think I can muddy the way enough it won't move as they intend. After that, the river and forest can argue I won't be invited. That's an illusion." His eyes flicked to my sleeve. "You're already part of it." "I know. Let me take a sample from you." His voice dropped. "Just a sliver. If we understand how it runs in a mobile host." "No." I cut him. "I'm not one more tank. You already got your bridge." He flinched. Guilt and hunger fought behind his eyes. "If you feel anything shift in your mind," he said, "tell me. Even if I can't stop it, I can at least know." "You never stop, do you?" "If we're drowning, I want to know how deep." Near dusk, with canisters packed, sections of root-fused wall, a sawn-off arm from a partly integrated figure, a dense knot Ross believed was a local node. Cole called the final load. The clearing shimmered with heat. Vines had pulled back from the direct path between hatch and boat, gathering in thick braids at the tree bases. It looked like the forest was politely making way. We shouldered the last container aboard and lashed it. Cole hovered over one canister in particular, the one with the brain knot. "This is priority. If we dump the rest, this still goes." Ross didn't bother arguing. He'd lost too much ground. I took my place at the wheel. The generator rumbled up, stuttering once as my improvised connections found purchase. On shore, the portable units fed current back into the blockhouse through root-wrapped cables, keeping lights and scrubbers alive. Those same lines crawled with fine growth. "All aboard." Cole's voice was hoarse. "Cast off." Lines came free. The hull shifted, eager. "On your mark." My hand hovered over throttle and the altered switch run. "Do it." I ran the sequence. For a heartbeat, the boat behaved. Generator output climbed. Pumps hummed, drawing fuel, moving water. The comms array reached up for satellites beyond the canopy. Then the surge hit the damage. The plant tissue threaded through fuel and under the hull acted as both conductor and resistor, soaking and spitting charge in ugly pulses. Cables heated under their jackets, insulation smoked. On the bank, the portable generators spat sparks as root-sheathed lines pushed energy back into soil. For an instant, the altered ring lit like X-ray, root webs under the ground flaring in branching patterns, showing through the top layer like buried lightning. The vapor-filled compartment tore. The blast came as a brutal, close explosion. Metal panels buckled. A tongue of flame punched out. Heat slammed into my legs. The boat lurched sideways, men tumbling. One canister strap snapped, the cylinder skidded. Cole lunged for the priority container. Another canister burst, its seals failing, contents flinging out in a wet arc across scorched ground. The tissue hit and went to work, filaments hammered down into hot soil, racing along cracks. The closest crewman staggered, clothes burning. He stumbled toward the rail. Vines from the bank whipped around his legs, slowing his fall, not as rescue, but as if testing how a burning body might serve. I dropped, ears ringing, eyes full of smoke. I didn't see Ross again in the smoke. Last I'd seen, he'd stumbled back toward the hatch, yelling something I couldn't make out through the ringing. My wrist felt like a coal. When I forced myself up, the deck was chaos. Twisted metal, scattered gear, shouting. Water poured through a rent near the stern. Fire chewed at cables. Voices yelled from somewhere. Cole, one sleeve burned through to raw flesh, clutched the intact node canister like an infant. He half jumped, half fell to the muddy bank, rolled, came up still holding it. "Costa, move!" I staggered toward the bow. The deck tilted as the boat drank. Heat blistered my back. As I leapt for the bank, the soil under me bulged where a root cracked through. Tendrils from the spilled sample raced to meet it. Behind, my boat groaned, rolled, and settled, flames hissing out as water swallowed them. I hit my knees in the mud. My chest burned. Every nerve in my infected arm screamed. "Secondary transport." Cole gripped my shoulder. "Move!" "Secondary what?" He jerked his head toward brush along the bank. Ortega and Lucio hauled a camouflage tarp away, revealing a compact inflatable with a small outboard. "You thought we put everything in your rust bucket?" Cole coughed. "Please." He shoved the canister into my arms. "Carry." The container was heavier than it looked. The tissue inside shifted, pressing at the walls. We splashed along the shallows. Behind us, clearing and ruin blurred into a fight between fire, water, and green persistence. The blast had done more than I'd planned. In the scorched circle, soil had cracked in rays. Spilled tissue flowed into the fractures and vanished. New shoots burst along the edges too fast, curling like stretching fingers. At the perimeter, altered trees leaned toward the river, roots loosening as if preparing to move. In the shallows, tendrils slid into the water, testing current. They neither drowned nor dissolved. They swayed, adjusted, anchored to submerged stone. We shoved the inflatable free. It wallowed, found its line. I dropped the canister into the bottom, climbed, legs shaking. Ortega and Lucio piled in. Cole kicked us off and launched the outboard. The forest slid by in unnatural order. "That blast went further than you thought." Ross's voice crackled in my ear. I hadn't noticed the radio still on. "We felt it. Half the internal lights died. Corridors down. I've lost some of the outer cameras. We're leaving." Cole coughed. "Primary samples compromised, but we have the node. Be at the pier within 36 hours or fend for yourself." "Ross, status," I pressed. "Static, then. Vines are reorganizing. They pulled back from the hatch, surged elsewhere. Harris's structure reacted. The growth moves along him in new patterns. I think it's dumping load through him. Get out, I told him. Seal what you can. Warn everyone you can reach to stay away from that valley. He gave a harsh laugh. You think anyone listens? They'll come for ruins and stories. I'll be lucky if they let me keep my lungs. The radio popped and went dead. Whether by his hand or something else's, I couldn't tell. The inflatable bumped over small wakes. The canopy thinned a fraction. I looked back. Over the trees, a faint shimmer hung like heat above asphalt, thicker, as if the air itself had changed. No smoke, no fog, a distortion where the network's new signals rode the space between leaf and sky. We hadn't killed the blockhouse or its forest. We'd fed it new energy, new touch points. We'd also drawn some of its lines in light. The problem was, I'd become one of those lines. As we ran, my arm pulsed with each twist of the river. When we passed small tributaries, I felt a tug deeper than muscle. A sense of knowing. Turn there for hidden water. Here for a fuel drum behind someone's shed. There for a private camp. Smuggler routes I'd learned over years and places I'd only heard of lit up inside my skull like Price's prints. Between those real places and the new growth, thin threads stretched. Possibilities. Cole watched me. You feel it, he said over the motor. Feel what? The paths. When we cut those conduits and you threw that lever, whatever's in you got a promotion. You're a routing table now. He tapped his head. In there you know every channel where no one questions a boat with foreigners and a crate. Every sidearm, depot, landing strip. People above me are going to want that. I'm not your GPS. For now, you are. For as long as this thing wants you walking. The river widened slightly. We weren't at the main yet, but the canopy opened to a strip of sky the color of old steel. I thought about rolling overboard, letting the river take me, hoping it diluted whatever rode my blood. But the network already had my shape. That damage was done. We reached the ghost pier before the second dawn, after a day and a night of riding the current and stealing minutes of sleep whenever the outboard could idle without drifting us into a bank. The inflatable was quick, and the altered forest, strangely, smoothed our way. Cole had cached extra fuel bladders for the motor. We fed it until it ran hot and angry. Vines held high on the banks, roots in the water withdrawing from under our hull like something making room. Price wasn't waiting. A different vehicle idled near the access road. A dark SUV with government plates from the wrong region. Windows tinted too dark for local law. The SUV's engine kept a low growl, steady as a generator. No interior light came on when the front door opened. A man stepped out who did not belong to Manaus Knights. Shirt pressed, tie loosened but still there. Hair cut short enough that heat hadn't tamed it. He carried himself like air conditioning was his natural climate. Farther up the access road, a plain pickup waited half in shadow, a driver smoking and watching the pier. Cole must have gotten a burst out on the sat phone in the chaos after the blast. The SUV sat with its nose toward the river, engine already warm, like it had been told to be here by first light, and had been waiting since. We bumped the inflatable against the rotting pilings. Cole climbed out first, boots slipping once in the mud. He bent, heaved the foam-lined canister up from the bottom of the boat, and tucked it to his chest, like a child he didn't trust anyone else to hold. Mud streaked his trousers. One sleeve had burned away near the elbow. The skin beneath was blistered and shiny. He did not wince. Ortega and Lucio followed him up the crooked planks, moving like men who'd already spent their fear and were running on whatever came after. I came last. My legs felt hollow. The canister seemed heavier in Cole's arms than metal should be, as if something inside had learned the weight of gravity. The man in the tie spoke first, in Portuguese better than Price's and far colder. You lost the main asset. Cole shifted the canister. We saved the important one. The Thai man's gaze flicked toward me once, then away, as if I were a spare part no one had decided to discard yet. "And the others?" he asked. "Dead or written off?" Cole's tone stayed even. "Your brief said plausible deniability first, not a clean head count." The man's mouth twitched like that was technically accurate and still irritated him. The rear door of the SUV opened just enough for another outline to emerge and close it with a light touch. Brazilian, maybe late 50s, softness at the waist that didn't reach his eyes. No badge on his belt, but the way he glanced at the pier told me his job. Counting angles, noting where someone could stand with a phone, where a camera might catch his plates. He switched to my language with an accent from the capital. "Senor Costa." I straightened without planning to. Old habit, from talking to men who could wreck my year with a pen. "You came highly recommended," he went on. "Also highly flagged. Interesting combination." "My brother, the arrangement." He raised one hand. "Your brother is still not in a camp, and the review board did not reopen his case." His tone made the second part more important than the first. He nodded toward the Thai man, who opened a tablet in a cheap plastic case, shielded the screen so I wouldn't see more than necessary, then tilted it, just enough. I recognized the document. The same release note Price had slipped me at the Ghost Pier days earlier, now with extra lines and stamps. Review concluded. Outpatient status maintained. No further punitive transfer pending. Joao's name sat in the middle of the paragraph like a hook. "You did this," I said. "We kept it done," he corrected. "Your consular friend pushed the first papers. My people made sure no one pulled them back to the bottom of the pile." "Price?" I asked. "Back in the air, very busy filing nothing at all." A faint smile. "Washington is finished with this phase. Brasilia is not. For now," he gave a small shrug, "I am your point of contact. Call me Silver." That would not be the name on his real ID. Men at his level didn't walk around with those. Behind me, one of the SUV's doors opened again. 2 more men got out. Local muscle dressed down, but with the posture of people who knew how to aim. Up the pier, the pickup's engine started. One of Silver's men jerked his chin at Ortega and Lucio. "You two, comeles, deploymento, papelada." Ortega gave me a quick look I couldn't read, then followed the order. Lucio hesitated a heartbeat, then climbed into the pickup's back seat, shotgun still slung. The truck rolled away toward the road, taillights dipping over ruts, taking them out of the night. I didn't know it then, but months later I'd hear a nurse mention Ortega's name in connection with a training accident, and a dock worker swear Lucio was back on some federal task force. Only advisory, you understand. Men like that never go far. They just change uniforms. Cole shifted his weight. "We need controlled storage for this now." He jerked his chin at the canister. "Your lab people were very clear. 24 hours if possible. He," another tilt of the head at me, "comes with, under quarantine. The thing in him is part of the package." Silver studied me properly then. His gaze moved over my face, down my sleeves, taking inventory. "Do you feel unwell?" he asked in Portuguese. I almost said yes. Instead, "I feel like I did 3 days of bad work in one." Cole lifted his burned arm slightly. "He's linked. When we changed the grid downstairs, he reacted before the concrete. He can feel paths." Silver's interest sharpened. "Paths?" "Channels," Cole said. "Rivers, hidden docks, fuel depots, smuggler routes. He's one more piece of interface. I recommend we don't let him walk away." He didn't bother lowering his voice. Silver nodded once, decision made. "Then we keep you. For your safety, of course." His eyes held mine. "And ours." "Do I have a choice?" I asked. "You had choices upriver," he said. "You used them. Now we live with what that means." The 2 local men stepped in. One carried restraints meant to look soft, padded fabric with hidden hardpoints. Cole moved closer. "Play along, Costa. The alternative is a shallow hole and a press note about a guide lost in an accident." And Joao? I asked. Then someone explains his outpatient status was a mistake. Cole didn't raise his voice, but I heard every word. You know how easy paper tears. The restraints went around my wrists. Padded, yes. Tight enough that the blood throbbed under my skin. Where the welt ran along my inner arm, the pressure made the hidden lines flare, as if they didn't like being squeezed. Silver gestured toward the back seat. We have a medical bay in town. You will answer questions. They will evaluate your condition. You may even like it. Good air, regular meals. His smile didn't touch his eyes. Better than a camp. I have seen camps, I said. Your measure of better is very generous. He laughed once. Then think of it as an exclusive clinic. Cole climbed in beside the canister. I was steered to the other side, pushed down into leather that had never seen river mud. As the door shut, I caught one last glimpse of the water. The altered forest along the far bank leaned as if the trunks shared a thought. The SUV turned away from the river and carried us toward the city lights. They didn't call it a cell. On the paper taped to the door, someone had written a room number and the word isolamento in neat hospital script. The first nights blurred. I woke and slept without knowing how many times. White walls, no posters, a narrow bed bolted to the floor, and a window too high to show more than a slice of sky. Occasionally a helicopter drifted past out there, a brief shadow over the glass. They took blood often. A male nurse with tired eyes and thick forearms wrapped the tourniquet, found a vein, filled labeled tubes. He didn't ask where I had been. He didn't make small talk beyond Vipikar and Relaxer. Behind him, a woman in a plain uniform recorded numbers on a tablet, sometimes looking at my face like she wanted to ask questions and had been told not to. At first, my arm looked almost normal. The welt had faded to a thin line. If I pressed the skin just below it, I felt something firm under the surface, like a small stick buried in sand. When I sat by the window in the afternoon, letting light touch that side of my body, faint threads darkened beneath the skin, branching from the line toward elbow and wrist. They brightened slowly, as if answering something very far away. A physician in a cheap suit introduced himself as Dr. Paulo. No first name, no badge, just a laminated card that could have said anything. Voce esta estavel, he said in Portuguese that had lived in the south before coming here. Meaning you are not getting worse fast enough to alarm us. That is good for everyone. For everyone here, I said. He flipped a page in his folder. They say you can feel things. Roots, directions. Sometimes. I hated admitting it. When I close my eyes, I see water, lines, places where boats stop. Most of them are real. Some I do not recognize. Can you tell which is which? Not always. He considered that. We will need you to map them. Over time. If we understand what the thing inside you is trying to reach, we can manage risk. You mean direct it, I said. Managing risk means many things. He lowered the folder. I read the incident summary, very dry. A pity. I suspect the human version of that story would be interesting. You are welcome to go upriver yourself, I said. He smiled thinly. I have children. My brave years are behind me. He poked and prodded, pressed along the lines under my skin. When his fingers traced one of the darker branches, a sensation ran up my arm and into my jaw like biting down on foil. Somewhere in the back of my head, a stretch of muddy shoreline flickered into view, with rusting barrels and 3 half-sunk boats. I had been there once, years ago, delivering contraband diesel for a miner who shorted me on payment. Paolo saw my eyes shift. Onde? Where? I told him. He made a note. And now? Nothing. Gone. You will tell us whenever that happens. It wasn't a question. There are men who will want to cross-check those locations with what they know. They will ask you their own questions. Men like Silver, I said. He didn't flinch. Men like Silver answer to other men. You are now in their stack of concerns. That is both dangerous and useful. To whom? That depends on how you behave, he said. He left without saying more. That was the pattern here. Enough truth to make the threat clear, never enough to see the whole chart. Days passed in routines that didn't belong to me. Blood in the morning. Questions after that. Rest that didn't feel like rest in the afternoons while I sat on the narrow bed and let sunlight draw more lines under my skin. They tried paper maps first. A young analyst with hair cropped regulation short and a shirt one size too large came in with printed charts of tributaries, ports and inlets. Mark where you feel a pull, one said, putting a pen in my hand. Mesmo que não tenha certeza, even if you are not sure. I am never sure, I told him. Then mark anyway. We look for patterns. They showed me outlines of places I knew. I tapped some without thinking. Warehouses behind the commercial dock in Manaus, an airstrip cut illegally into scrub near the border, a cluster of shacks downriver where barges stopped with no manifest. Those pings came with clear images in my head, like memories replaying. Others came with nothing I recognized. When I closed my eyes, I saw the top of a crane in some foreign port, the grey shape of a container ship whose markings I couldn't read, a dock with concrete pilings too neat to be local. Those images felt thinner, like radio static trying to form words. Those, I said, pointing at one stretch of coast on the chart he brought. I have never seen. Too clean, too cold. But when I sit in the window, I feel something moving there. Like when a big boat comes past your house at night and you only know it from the change in the current under your floor. The analyst wrote quickly. You think the network has reached that far? I do not know what the network thinks, I said. I just know what my arm does. On a television in the nurses' station, news channels played with the sound low. I watched through the doorway when I could. Every few days there was a small item from somewhere I half recognized. Unusual aquatic growth shutting part of a dock in a river town upriver. Experts debating whether it was algae or a plant. A cargo ship in a foreign harbour held offshore for inspection after port workers reported rapid vine growth on ropes and fenders. A short, careful report about a minor illness cluster among men who had worked on a United States vessel in Belém. Nothing alarming, just monitoring. None of it stayed on screen long. It never made headline status. But the locations lined up with points that had flared in my head when Paolo pressed certain parts of my arm. When I told him that, he listened with real attention. This is good, he said once. If we know, we can advise. Suggest precautions. To who? To whoever is willing to listen, he answered. And to those who are not willing, we at least record that they were warned. Does warning ever change anything at your level? I asked. He hesitated, just for a breath. Sometimes. Not enough, but sometimes. That was the most honest thing he ever said to me. They took me to a different room once. Not a lab, not quite an office. Table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, no window. The air conditioner rattled in the ceiling. Cameras sat behind dark domes in the corners. Silver waited inside, alone. He had taken off his jacket, but not his tie. A bottle of water on the table, 2 plastic cups, both empty. Sit, he said. I sat. We have reviewed your cooperation so far. He steepled his fingers, studied my face. You answer questions, but you also choose what to emphasize, what to forget. If I remembered every cove and sandbar I ever used, I would not have room in my head for anything else. He made a small, amused sound. True. Still, some of your omissions are interesting. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, photos clipped from satellite passes and aerial surveys. Some showed the valley we had left. In each sequence, more of the canopy fell into the same eerie order. Crowns bound, trails reorganized into patterns that meant nothing to me and too much to the thing under my skin. Your American friends continue their work, he said. You are not the only one they use in this region, but you are unique. You are touched. We want to understand what path you are pushing them toward. I am not pushing, I said. If anything, I am dragging. You nudge. He tapped the photos. Routes you suggest. Routes you leave out. You steer them away from certain indigenous reserves, toward derelict industrial zones instead. That is commendable. Human. Also predictable. You sound disappointed, I said. I am a realist. If you did not try, I would worry about what the plant has done to you. He switched to English suddenly. But make no mistake, Bruno. In this shared project, even partial information helps. You cannot help one group without giving something to the other. You understand? I knew that when I took their money in the bar, I said. I know it more now. He leaned back. Then we are clear. You keep talking on our schedule. You keep sitting in your window and letting that thing draw its little maps. We will keep your brother on the outside of any fence. That is our arrangement. And if I stop? I asked. There is always someone else. His gaze didn't waver. Another guide, another smuggler, another man who needs a favor. Maybe they will not be infected. Maybe they will make bigger mistakes. He rolled one shoulder. You have already survived contact. That qualifies you for some responsibilities. He stood, gathering the photos. One more thing, Senor Costa. Some of the locations you named in Europe and the States. He flicked a glance at the file. That did not come from our people. Those ties are new. Whatever made you that way is thinking past your river now. He let that sit between us. They walked me back to my room. The corridor floors had a glossy shine that reflected every overhead strip. Someone had tried to soften the place. A cheap ceramic pot near the nurse's station, a hardy vine with heart-shaped leaves trailing down. For a floor that called itself isolation, it was a stupid detail. Human, but stupid. That night I could not sleep. I swung my legs off the bed and sat there with my feet flat on the tile. The room was quiet except for the air unit's uneven rattle. I thought of João breathing in some crowded clinic, staff changing his medication according to guidelines written in places he would never see. I thought of the forest upriver, the blockhouse, the man fused into the chair, Harris under his sheet, the cleared ring where new shoots would already be forming in ash, using whatever charge we had given them. You had choices upriver, Silva had said. You used them. He was right. None of them had been clean. After some time, I realized I was no longer alone. Something narrow lay against my right foot, cool and flexible. I looked down. The runner from the corridor plant had found a crack under the door. It had wormed through, then turned along the grout lines until it reached the bed. It rested now across my toes, leaf just touching skin, adjusting its angle minutely as if seeking better contact. I could have kicked it away, stamped it flat, called the nurse, shouted for maintenance, demanded they clear any greenery from this floor. I did not move. The line under my arm warmed. A faint pattern woke behind my eyes. The curve of a river I knew, the curve of a coastline I did not, and glimmering threads between them that might be shipping lanes or something older. The plant's thin weight against my foot was almost nothing. An ordinary thing, cheap decoration in an anonymous clinic. I watched it and stayed still, feeling for which way the currents wanted to run.